when she roared into town on her noisy steed, she commanded attention. If there was one thing Elizabeth considered important above all others, it was the ability to command attention. It was the only way to get things done. Having so justified her choice of transportation, she chugged and sputtered up the hill toward the long driveway that would take her home to the manor house. She had about a half-mile to go when a few yards down the road, a woman appeared at a white lattice garden gate and frantically waved a large handkerchief at her. Even at that distance, Elizabeth could tell that Winnie Pierce was distraught about something. Winnie's family had been tenants of the Wellsborough estate for as long as Elizabeth could remember. When she'd inherited the manor house upon the death of her parents, she'd also inherited the cottages on the vast acres that went with it, which was just as well, since her miserable ex-husband had gambled away every penny of her inheritance. The rent from those cottages was the only thing standing between herself and abject poverty. Not that the tenants knew that, of course. It might weaken her authority if the residents of Sitting Marsh knew their chief adviser and protector was struggling to keep the manor house and all its holdings afloat in a sea of debts. Elizabeth was well aware that the 17th century Jacobean mansion, with its warm brick walls and towering windows, was a symbol of stability in a world gone mad. The imposing ancestral home visibly dominated the rural landscape, and the villagers looked upon those ancient walls as proof that the old world still existed, and would go on existing long after the Germans and their vicious Luftwaffe had done their worst. Symbols as powerful as that had to be maintained, no matter the cost. She owed it to her people and to her family, whose traditions and heritage must be upheld. The residents of Sitting Marsh always came first. It was as simple as that. Which was why she braked to a sudden stop in front of Winnie Pierce, at great risk to her perilous control of the machine. The manoeuvre pitched her forward, and she bumped her chin painfully on the handlebar. She ran a tongue over her teeth to make sure they were all intact before climbing off as gracefully as one could manage under the circumstances. Winnie flapped her apron up and down in front of her round face, which glowed like a ripe tomato. She smelled faintly of onions and garlic, and a smudge of flour adorned her left cheek. Elizabeth immediately felt hungry. Having sampled the results of some of Winnie's delectable culinary skills in the past, she rather hoped her tenant would invite her to a midday meal. Violet did her best, but cooking was not one of her greatest achievements, and now that everything was rationed, the housekeeper's offerings were becoming decidedly insipid. "I'm so sorry, Lady Elizabeth," Winnie said breathlessly. "I know I shouldn't have stopped you, but I've been so worried. I'm at wit's end, really I am." Concerned by the poor woman's obvious agitation, Elizabeth patted her plump shoulder. "It's quite all right, Winnie. Just calm down and tell me what's the matter." "Well, I don't rightly know, Mum. It's Beryl, you see." Elizabeth took a moment to smooth out the folds in her skirt. Beryl was Winnie's 16-year-old daughter, an only child and thoroughly spoiled. Beryl's promiscuous activities were a hot topic for the town and a source of great worry for her poor parents. Elizabeth had taken it upon herself to talk some sense into the child, whose overdeveloped attributes drew attention from the boys like flies to a dustbin. Beryl had listened politely and completely ignored the proffered counsel. Half afraid to ask, Elizabeth murmured, "I do hope she isn't sick." "Oh no, Mum. At least I don't think so." To Elizabeth's dismay, the poor woman burst into tears. It was a moment or two before she'd sufficiently recovered herself enough to speak. "She's missing, Mum. She's been gone since Sunday. That's 2 whole days." The news appeared worse than Elizabeth had anticipated.